This is Holly Fry from Stuff You Missed in History class. Toyota is a leader when it comes to electrified vehicles. Today, battery EVs make up less than 10% of new vehicles sold because of higher cost and concerns about range and charging. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future. With an electrified, diversified lineup of hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery EVs, Toyota empowers you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint. Learn more and get details at toyota.com/beyondzero. Toyota, let's go places.
Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime. This week, it's an AFC West showdown as the Denver Broncos head to Kansas City to take on the defending champion Chiefs. Not a Prime member? Sign up for a 30-day free trial to stream the game. Live from Kansas City, it's the Broncos and the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a baller.
What's up? We're back. The Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast, Wednesday, October 11th. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined by Jason Moore and Matthew Betz back in the saddle.
Was that Matthew Betz?
Did you say Matthew Betz?
Yeah, it was definitely Matthew Betz. I think Kyle's got too much baseball on the brain right now. You know, it's playoff baseball. He's like, oh, Matthew, now batting, Matthew Betz.
Matthew Betz.
I thought my headphones glitched or my internet glitched for a second. I was like, did he just... Okay, yep, he did just say that. All right, yeah.
You know...
So, yeah, Matthew Betz here with you for some playoff baseball talk.
I'm okay with that because my Braves are playing your Phillies this week, and Jason's Diamondbacks are also doing quite well. It's kind of fun.
Don't you dare. Don't you dare
Your
put that on me.
Diamondbacks.
Die hard.
I don't do baseball.
It's kind of fun, though. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I like for the place where I live that the Diamondbacks were playing well, but I don't care. Let's talk football.
We do have a lot to talk about when it comes to football. And I was out this past week, so on Dynasty Podcast, you got to tell me, Betz, did Andy and Mike hold it down? That was the first time we've had that triumvirate together.
Yeah, it was a first for the three of us. You know, Andy was not the best in the host role. He's a little inexperienced in that, as you guys know. So that was a little struggle for everyone to listen through. But yeah, man, it was fun. We talked some Dynasty trade targets for contenders. If you needed a guy to go out and get. We talked David Montgomery. He had a good week. We talked Adam Thielen. He had a good week. Then we also talked about some guys that you could get for a rebuild. So it was fun.
Well, I was on the beach, but I was making some trades with Al Borland. We traded away DeAndre Swift. We traded away Aaron Jones, going full tank job.
I heard.
So,
did he tell you he texted me about Aaron Jones?
He did tell me that he needed a backup. Jason made a little play at DeAndre Swift, but I feel like he knew it wasn't really going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to, acquire on the cheap and grow my team, but it worked out for both of us because I was able to make a different move that I think is better for my team.
Yeah, we've got 5 firsters next year. So 2024, what a year that will be. We are glad you're with us on this Dynasty Podcast. On this show, we're going to be talking about Dynasty bounce back. Some players in Week 5 that went nuclear. Man, my sinus stinks right now. We're going to talk about some players that went off in Week 5 and what that means moving forward. And then also discuss why it's so easy after a month into the season to fall into some traps with certain players and just say, this is who they are, knowing that we have a bigger sample size. But to start the show out, gentlemen, I get to do one of my favorite things. One of my favorite things possible in hosting a podcast.
I want to play a game.
Jason, do you love that drop? Because Betz hates it.
So I love the drop, but I hate the game. Now, here's the thing. When you get to play this game as the host of the game, which I've done many times, it is a delight. It is so much fun when you get to be the one to terrorize the other gentlemen on the podcast, making them sound ridiculous feel ridiculous while also enlightening the audience. Now, I saw what this game was just now, just a minute ago. I know your game, and this is not going to go well for really anyone.
Yeah, Betz, you hate it?
I mean, I don't mind it when I know it's coming, but Kyle has done this on the DFS pod with me before where, especially on our off-season episodes, he won't even tell me that it's happening. He'll just put the drop in and say, hey, surprise. And then I have no clue what we're going to talk about. I look like an idiot. So yes, that is Kyle's goal every episode, is to make us look silly, which I think is going to happen today.
I feel like I used to do this more with Jason, where I'd feed him. We'd talk behind the scenes, and then he'd get to spring it on the other two. Maybe we'll find something this week, Jason.
Yeah, I want to play a game.
Okay, we'll find some stats. What this is we're going to compare two players, and I want my two fellow co-hosts to just guess what they think the answer is when it's clear there is a bend in this answer. And the reason I'm bringing this out is more to have a dynasty discussion about Brock Purdy, okay? Just here's where we're at 5 weeks into the season. But what I did is I did some digging in the spreadsheets, and I looked at Brock Purdy's games so far in his career. He's had 13 full games. That's how I'm going to clarify this, because he had the game in the NFC Championship where he threw 4 passes, was gone, and it was Josh Johnson. So I'm going to throw that game out. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fair. He was not the quarterback.
Okay, so games that he played, I put it at 80+% of the snaps. He was the quarterback. And I compared that with Patrick Mahomes over his last 13 games. So both of these players over their last 13 games, that includes the playoffs. Okay? So, who do you think has won more games in their last 13?
Considering the current record of these two teams, oh man, they're both great. I'm going to go Brock Purdy.
I was going to say, I think it's Purdy. Obviously, they're undefeated this year, and then they lost that championship game to the Eagles, but that doesn't count, right?
Correct.
So
are we undefeated?
Has he lost a game as a starter?
No, just that playoff game.
Yeah, all right.
So it's got to be Brock Purdy.
It is. It is Brock Purdy because, remember, week 1, Patrick Mahomes did lose to the Lions. So it's 13-12. I wanted to start off there. Wins, whether you call that a QB stat or not, just want to throw that out there. But what about total touchdowns? Who has more total touchdowns over the last 13 games played? Patrick Mahomes or Brock Purdy?
Oh my goodness gracious. Total touchdowns.
I mean, that matters for fantasy, right?
I'm going to say that matters a lot. I'm going to go.
I think it's Purdy.
I'm going to say Mahomes. You want us to answer Purdy. It should be Mahomes.
You guys know me well. It is Mahomes, but by 1, 30-29.
Yeah, I won.
Oh my God.
30-29. Okay, so
30-29.
That's wild, isn't it? What about rushing touchdowns, though?
Well, then it's obviously Brock.
It's Purdy, 4-2. Okay. Now, I want to dig down a little deeper because Purdy has been efficient. The touchdowns have been there. He's basically been like 250 and 2 machine. This past week, it was 4 touchdowns. In terms of pure pass attempts, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you this right now. Patrick Mahomes has thrown the ball 422 times over that span. Purdy has done it just 299 times. Okay, so there's almost 130 pass attempts difference between these two. Okay,
within 13 games.
Within 13 games. Okay, so Mahomes throws more. That makes sense. Who has completed more 20-plus air yard completions?
It's got to be Brock, or you wouldn't be asking the question.
I was going to say, I think it's got to be Purdy because when you think about Mahomes, MVS is running wind sprints out there, and Kelsey's getting the ball 6, 7, 8 yards down the field every play.
It is actually funny. On the course of the career, Mahomes is an excellent deep ball thrower to Tyreek Hill, but since losing to Tyreek Hill last year, the entire season, he was not really a deep ball thrower. So this one is clearly Brock Purdy, despite the fact that you think of Mahomes as a downfield thrower and you don't think of Brock Purdy that way.
Yes, it's Purdy 18-16, and it kind of also reinforces the idea where Purdy is kind of seen as like, oh, he's just a game manager. Anybody can work in Kyle Shanahan's system. Like, no, he's hitting deep throws as well. And the last one, which is my favorite stat when I grade quarterbacks coming into the NFL, it's what I loved about CJ Stroud is can they hit the intermediate throws, the 11 to 19 yard throws. Those are the ones that matter the most since, what was that? Like December. So 13 games. Who has more completions in the intermediate area of the field? Brock Purdy or Patrick Mahomes?
I with the passing attempts, I think it's going to be close, but I'm gonna go Mahomes. I think that would just be pretty crazy if in that range of the field, Brock is still better than Mahomes with that total amount of passing volume difference.
I think that's a good take. I think it's still Purdy because when I think about Mahomes, I picture the little, like touch forward when they run the sweep or whatever. When that counts as a pass attempt, you got screens left and right. I think it's Purdy.
It is Purdy, 56-43. It's actually a pretty big guess.
That is crazy.
56-43?
Yes. This is where he slays. This is like his area. And the reason why I bring this up is because Brock Purdy is at a point now where we can't just say, is he a system quarterback? He's a fantasy quarterback. Like, he's the QB5 right now in 4-point leagues. So my discussion is, where does he belong in terms of Dynasty? Because we talked about this offseason, we did our Superflex ranking shows. There's a big 6 or 7 with Fields and Lawrence kind of at the end of that tier is what we said. And then after that, it was Tua, who we'd say is probably way ahead of Purdy. But does Purdy belong in that next tier? Like after Anthony Richardson, would you put him ahead of Dak Prescott in Dynasty?
I don't think so. It's a worthy conversation. I think that Brock Purdy is legitimate. This offense is unstoppable. But the one thing you didn't bring up in all these stats to compare him to Patrick Mahomes is total yardage, which is, when you score fantasy points, your rushing yards, your passing yards, your touchdowns. That's where everything is coming from as a quarterback. He's got the touchdowns. He's a touchdown machine. He's guaranteed 2 a game. We saw last week him throw 4. The issue is total volume here, and when you look, he's good on the season, but he doesn't usually have like monstrous week-winning performances. I'm looking at last year when he was starting and playing very well. 3 times he was in the top 10 at the quarterback position. 2/3 of those times, though, he didn't even hit 20 points, and his high on the season was 21. So I think I still lean Dak there.
I think it's
pretty close in my opinion. Dak's 30 years old now. Brock Purdy not yet 24. He's got the weapons. They're all signed. Like, I mean, does Brandon Cooks have anything left? Is Gallup a difference maker? I don't know. So at this point, I think the offense misses Kellen Moore in Dallas. I kind of lean Brock Purdy.
It's one of those things where I've always loved volume. If I'm going to go for a quarterback who's mostly a pocket passer, give me the volume. And you've been able to rely on efficiency, which is usually something we'd say like, hey, that's going to regress. And I think TD rate wise, we'll talk about that later. It changes, but I think he's beyond a strong QB2. Like, I think he's more than that right now. And you probably can't trade for him in a 2-quarterback league because whoever has him probably got him for free. And he was their QB2, and now they're like, sweet, I plug and play every single week. This offense is going to score almost 30 points every single week. So it's interesting because before the season, he was in the we don't really know. It was such a small sample size. And now we're at a point where it's like, man, he just feels so safe every single week. So
he feels safe. He's got a safe enough floor.
Right.
But he is not going to win people titles. I mean, in a 2 QB in a super flex where you need a reliable second option, he has an important role to play. But I still, this is a true pocket passer. Looking at his starts last year, using the metric you said, over 80% of his games, he averaged 1.7 rushing yard per game. I believe it's up in the 4s now this year, but this is a guy who is not getting any yards on the ground. He's going to stay in the pocket, deliver, because their plays are so scripted. Their designs, the Shanahan designs are like, you're going to snap the ball, here's where you're looking, then you're looking there. There's not as much playmaking necessary. So I still hesitate. I know he's been so consistent this year, and I don't want to denigrate anything he's doing, but for fantasy purposes, I don't believe he has a ceiling. I don't believe this last week was his highest performance for fantasy ever. Took 4 touchdowns to get to 26 points. He's not throwing 4 touchdowns usually. And 26 points, you're like, Dak can get there. Dak can go out and have, a 367-yard, 2-touchdown game, add some scrambling on the ground. I feel like Brock doesn't have a ceiling.
And that's totally fine. But he's more than what Derek Carr was that, QB 13, QB 14, QB 15 early on. Like, at least you could say this is an offense that it's the sum of all its parts, and the parts are the best in the league. So I can ride with that now, knowing, maybe it's low in QB1, not a ton of upside, but if you're in a super flex league, you got to be super happy. Betz, any final thoughts on Purdy here?
No, I think we touched on it. Jason made a good point of like, look, the ceiling is certainly not going to be there the way a rushing quarterback or a mobile quarterback is going to be. So that makes sense. But yeah, if you're settling him in as like, a weekly like quarterback 8 to quarterback 12 finisher most weeks, like that is so valuable in a super flex league, especially. So he's rock solid. And the best part is you probably got him for free off waivers or like a 5th round rookie pick or something like that. And now you're just riding it. So it's fun. I will say too on Dak though, the rushing for him has really fallen off year over year since that ankle injury. 45 rush attempts last year, 48 the year before. Like, he's a pocket passer now through and through as well. And 12 carries through 5 weeks of the season right now for Dak. So he's right there with Brock as far as his rushing ability at this point in his career.
And let me just be clear. I am not saying that Brock Purdy is better than Patrick Mahomes. I was cherry picking stats because it's fun to bring up a discussion. Which is always fun.
And some of those stats are mind-blowing. And also, Dak and Purdy are not on the same rushing level right now. Purdy doesn't run the ball at all. Dak is like, Dak's not great. Dak's going to be like 150, maybe 200 yards over the course of the season, which isn't great. But like,
He hasn't hit 200 since 2019.
He's on pace right now for 153 yards. And that's when they're getting blown out and blowing other teams out. But my point is, like,
what does it actually matter in fantasy? 150 yards over the course of a season?
Yeah, but Purdy's
a handful of points.
Purdy's last year his pace was 23 total rushing yards over the course of a 17-game season. This year it's like 45. I'm just saying. I think the Derek Carr comparison, Borg, is actually really apt. He was like a 4,000-yard thrower most years, threw enough touchdowns to be relevant, to never be a complete bust, to have a place. Ran the ball, 80 yards for a lot of his season. So I think if you look at Purdy the way that we look back on Derek Carr's career, I think that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, and we'll see what it's like beyond this year. If he's the guy, gets an extension, they're not going to be able to keep this crew together forever, right? Like Kittle, CMC, Debo, they're going to hit the twilight of their careers sooner than we think, probably in the next 2 years. But it's really fun. It's fun to see somebody this far in the draft show up, and they're just good.
I will go back on my, I'm always redraft focused usually from our main show, the Dak versus Purdy conversation for Dynasty. That's where, he might not have the ceiling in individual games that Dak has, but he's 7 years younger. Right. This is a bitty baby boy. You're talking about getting a huge career from Brock out in front of him.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about our main thing this week.
Hello, everybody. I am back.
We're going to talk bounce back. And in Dynasty, it can be tough because you're projecting over the course of time. But let's be honest. You are playing for right now. You're playing for this season. So it's one thing to talk about value for players and say this is what they're worth for the next 4 to 5 years. It's another thing to say, here's what this player did right now. Here's how they can help you for the rest of the season, and then maybe give some more context. So that's what we're going to do. Talk about a couple different players from these major positions. Should you trade them? Should you hold them? And I also wanted to start each discussion off with some stats that matter, because a month into the season, if somebody gives you somebody's, yards per reception or their ADOT or something else, it's so easy for that to skew. I mean, so easy. Somebody throws a Hail Mary at the end of the game, 60 yards. That counts as a target. That counts as on their, ADOT. It really matters, and that skews everything. So 4 to 5 games of the season, let's hold off on just saying this is who this player is, because things change, and things changed a lot for Justin Fields, guys, over the last 2 weeks. We had a discussion after week 1 that was like, this is bad, and it was bad for a couple of weeks. But I wanted to talk about his performance over the last couple of weeks, and I really wanted to highlight him as a thrower, because him as a runner has never been something we've questioned. We've kind of questioned, are they going to use more design runs? That's the big conversation last year. When they started giving him more than 5 design runs per game, the team was awesome. They averaged over 21 points per game, and he was the QB2. Like, he was awesome. This year, did they just decide, let's fart around again? Let's just have the exact same script as last year? Because that's what they did, right? The first
Seems
couple
that
weeks.
way. Yep, they were farting around out there, that's for
They
sure.
got
and then
last year's script.
they traded Chase Claypool.
Apparently, they just said, you know what? Justin Fields is better without Chase on the team. But he started getting more design runs in week 3, week 4, and then this past week he had 5 design runs, and he went bananas on Thursday Night Football, but not as a runner. I mean, 57 yards is awesome, but not Justin Fields like 80, 90, 100 yards awesome. It was him as a thrower. It was 4 touchdowns, 282 yards. What are you guys seeing? I know we're going to put on our film hats for a little bit, but like, is there any difference of just his approach as a thrower that you've seen so far in the last 2 weeks? Because it's changed from just dink and dunk stuff to, hey, we're going to throw the ball down the field.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they were talking about right in the first couple of weeks. And Fields even came out and he kind of said, like, look, these, shorter horizontal passes were the game plan. And sort of, when he said it, you could tell, like, he clearly was not a fan of that. And if you go back to his days at Ohio State, granted, I know it was an incredible offensive line. He had all the time in the world to deliver the ball downfield, but he was a good downfield passer coming out. And now you're seeing the offense at least give him the chance to do that. So I think that's been nice to see. I'm hesitant to say this is the new normal going forward, considering the matchups. Of course, Denver, we know the story there. And then Washington has shown some up and down play on the defensive side of the ball this year. Some good, some not so great. So, it's good to see. I'm just not sure, I guess, necessarily where the truth lies quite yet.
Yeah, he has been absolutely awesome. The correlation between 2023 games without Chase Claypool and 2023 games with Chase Claypool really been impressive. There was a tweet that Nick Whalen put out, and I thought this was really nice just to realize how good these games have been. He went and did the research on just how special Justin Fields' back-to-back 4 touchdown passing games are. To do that week after week, you wonder, is that common even in this modern NFL? The list of current quarterbacks to ever do it: Mahomes has done it 5 times. Aaron Rodgers has done it 3 times. Russell Wilson twice. Kirk Cousins twice. Josh Allen has only done it once. Watson once. Carr once. Lamar once. And now Justin Fields once. So this is, a real special 2 weeks, and it has been in the passing game. Half of it was against the Broncos, but half wasn't. I came into this year obviously high on Justin Fields. He was my guy. Tried to encourage through the bad games to stick with it.
Yes.
So I don't know if I'm just biased. I believe he has the talent and capability to upgrade as a passer. That, if I didn't think he could have been a good passer, he wouldn't have been a my guy coming into this season. Having seen it now in back-to-back games where he looks good, where he's freaking targeting DJ Moore like not a dummy, you finally get your wide receiver one. You don't see a lot of games where, Jalen Hurts is like, I'm not going to look A.J. Brown's way. It's like you've got an alpha. Take advantage of it. This isn't the new norm. This is a special outlier couple of weeks, but I do think that for fantasy purposes, he's going to be great going forward.
Yeah, and just to give some numbers to it, last year, 46.7% of his fantasy points came via the ground, which was insane. Like, when you get up to 40%, that's wild. Up to 50% is like historic numbers. This year, it's just 22%, which is actually a good thing. Like to be able to say that this player can also get it done through the air, because if you didn't have the rushing numbers, you'd go, who is this player? Do I even want him, like starting him at all? So I think you're going to see some of those numbers increase. And yeah, 4 touchdowns is an outlier, but 2, 1 through the air, 1 on the ground, like whatever it is, like you're going to be able to get more consistent approaches. And one of the things that I've been most impressed with is he's still being pressured all the time. 48% of his dropbacks is number 1 in the NFL. That's actually really scary. But they're using more play action this year, and he's completing 73% of his passes on play action compared to just 60% last year. If you can do stuff like that, that opens up bombs to DJ Moore, and we know he's good after the catch. So the deep ball, all that's like, those are the things that we want. We knew that he was good at, Betz mentioned, and you're seeing just a wide array of plays as opposed to let's throw a screen and let's not run the ball with this guy. So you're getting more design runs, you're getting deep throws. That's the fantasy goal.
Now, real quick, before we move on from him, since this is a Dynasty show, I think Justin Fields is going to be awesome for fantasy this year. I think he can win people championships. I also think that at the same time that that's happening, the Bears are going to keep losing games. And even if they don't, the Carolina Panthers are going to keep losing games.
Yes.
And should they get the number 1 overall pick, which right now they have very much the highest odds of achieving since they've got 2 horses in that race, I cannot see the Bears not taking Caleb Williams. Like that, to me, is what will happen. And should that happen and Justin Fields leads them to a poor season, I don't know that he gets a starting job elsewhere. So for Dynasty purposes, do you take these 2 back-to-back monstrous performances and try to parlay that into trading at the perfect high moment? Maybe you try to go get a Tua who has, a longer guaranteed career ahead of him, even if his fantasy peaks aren't quite as high, or trade him, in a package deal for something. Do you do that, or do you try to just use Fields to win a championship in your Dynasty League now? I mean, would you be trying to unload him?
It's such a good question, because it's rare to have a player who is playing well that you're also afraid that he won't be the starting quarterback.
Yeah, this is a unique situation.
Yeah, so I think we can say that Justin Fields will be a starting quarterback in the NFL. Like some other team will be like, yes, please, I want this player. And that's how I lean. Like, okay, let's say they do get the number 1 pick and they trade him away. They're going to trade him to a team that wants him to be their quarterback. So the situation, wherever he would end up going, I think would be just fine. It can't be a situation where it's like this team is going to be 20 times worse. So
I hear your logic. It's the same stuff that I've used with like Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, when people are scared about the Cardinals' future, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the Cardinals got the number 1 pick, because they would trade him to a starter. I'm just not as 100% convinced that he would be a starter next year in the NFL. I think there is a world that exists where nobody trades for Justin Fields, or he becomes a backup somewhere.
We also have to remember too, like NFL teams and GMs, coaches think about these quarterbacks way differently than we do, right? Like it could be so fun for us to be like, oh, like these design runs are crazy and the scheme is different, so it's better. But like if he just fails as a passer moving forward, or next year if he does land on a new team, they're not afraid to move on. Like we see that year after year after year, right? So I mean, it's such a tough call because the schedule opens up very well for him right now. So like if you are a contender and he's your guy, I get it. I mean, Vikings, Raiders, Chargers, his next 3 matchups. You get the Panthers in there, the Lions twice, the Vikings again. Like you can throw on all these teams, right? So it's a good matchup.
Okay, so just real quick,
I'm with Jason. I'm not sold.
Answer this question. Would you rather have Dynasty League? You just get to choose. You can choose to have Justin Fields on your roster or Tua on your roster. Who are you picking?
I'm going to say
I think I lean
Tua as well.
Okay, that's 3.
It's
see, because I went Tua as well. So
no, I loved it.
You add
I got
2
it.
plus 1 is 3.
It's good math, Jason. I think my last little point on Fields is if you're going to trade him now, like if you're not a contender and if you say, you know what, this is peak value, there's so many variables moving forward, he could stink again. Like whatever you think it is, then it makes sense to move on because you're trying to get picks for the future, whatever it is. But if you're contending, you just got to ride this. I mean, it's rare to have a player that can hit 30, 40 points for your team, just any given week. It doesn't really matter the matchup either. Like he could actually do it. So we'll take a quick break and talk about one more quarterback.
Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime. This week, it's an AFC West showdown as the Denver Broncos head to Kansas City to take on the defending champion Chiefs. Not a Prime member? Sign up for a 30-day free trial to stream the game. Live from Kansas City, it's the Broncos and the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
This is Holly Fry from Stuff You Missed in History class. We all agree that reducing carbon emissions is a good thing, and once again, Toyota is leading the way. We hear a lot about fully electric vehicles, and Toyota has them, and more on the way, but we also know a BEV is not for everyone, whether it's because of cost, range, or concerns about finding a charging station when you need it. Plus, the raw materials used to manufacture batteries are limited. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future, in vehicles and in manufacturing plants, too, in the years ahead. The materials used to make just one long-range battery for an EV could be used to make batteries for 6 plug-in hybrids or 90 gas-electric hybrids. That's why Toyota's position today is electrified, diversified, empowering you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint with the vehicle that's right for you. A hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or battery EV. So shop, learn more, and get details at toyota.com/beyondzero. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, we're back, and we're going to talk about Joe Burrow, who, through the first 4 weeks, I mean, doo-doo was the word that I could use to describe some of his statistics, and his ADOT was 6.6, which is really bad. His yards per attempt, guys, was lower than Bryce Young, which blows my mind that he would be using that. He had one completed pass of 20-plus air yards through the first 4 weeks, one of them. And I found this quote from Burrow, and I thought it was very clear. He said, "My ability to throw hasn't been affected through this injury. Mainly my ability to move in the pocket, run for first downs, extend plays, and find that extra second." So as a thrower, I don't think I've been worried apart from that week 1 game where, it was rainy and gross and whatever. But he went bananas in week 5 against the Cardinals. Jamar Chase went nuts. And I also found this quote. Zach Taylor said he spent a lot of the game on the headset telling Burrow, stop scrambling, throw the ball away. And Burrow just said, I didn't listen. Which Burrow is one of those players that we kind of have this case study the last couple of years. Zach Taylor tries something, has a game plan for the first couple weeks, and then Burrow just says, screw it. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. It's very Rodgers-esque, and you're seeing good fantasy production from it. So with Burrow, I wanted to gauge your temperature of how worried you guys were before this past week, before he went for 317-3 and just destroyed the Cardinals. How worried were you before? And then did that alleviate any concerns that you had? So Betz, why don't you start first?
I mean, for Dynasty, no concerns, right? I mean, Joe Burrow's clearly the guy. He's locked in. He's been incredible since he's been a starter. So there was never really any long-term concerns. I think certainly it was fair to say, look, like the calf injury is a major factor, but there seems to be other things going on that the offense is not functioning. So it wasn't just the calf injury. It was like, oh man, like I'm worried about how they're looking. Then you have the nice performance against Arizona, which, maybe was a little bit more predictable given the matchup. That said, it was nice to see, and I do think, look, they get Seattle this week, and then you get the bye week. Hopefully T. Higgins is back after that. Jamar Chase still doing his thing. So I think it's going to be all systems go down the stretch for Joe Burrow, assuming no third aggravation of that calf. So, I mean, it was nice to see. I think there's little concern after the bye week. I hope he can get through one more week, and then it should be good to go, I think, for Burrow and his health with the offense.
Jason, what about you? What was your concern level on Burrow?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, long-term concern was 0.0. Burrow's a phenomenal player. He's got an injury. He didn't forget how to play quarterback. There's none. I don't think anyone in the world was like, oh no, Burrow's lost it. He's he's not aging out. He's not there's no one who was worried about that. But as a dynasty manager myself, like our champ team has Joe Burrow, and it's been killing us. We're trying to go for the 4-peat here, and we're going home, man. We got to start like this last week. We started Brock Purdy, which was, we've got Brock Purdy and Derek Carr and Mac Jones, a bunch of clones. And then we got Joe Burrow, and I'm just thrilled to see this performance so that we can stop fearing starting him. When you have to bench Joe Burrow for those other types, it's treading water. It's trying to stay alive until he's right. We knew that, Joe Burrow is going to be the person leading us to the playoffs, leading us in the playoffs. You just need to come through. And I believe what he said about, at first you hear that quote and you're like, oh, what are you talking about? There was nothing wrong with your arm. You sucked. It was time to throw. It was the extra second, the mobility in the pocket. And we saw that change. Like, that isn't a box score statistic you can look up. But against the Cardinals, it wasn't just, oh, he realized he should target Jamar Chase 19 times. It was he moved and extended out of the pocket. I referenced on the main show one of the 3 touchdown passes to Jamar Chase, where the pocket started collapsing. He kind of rolls out to his right and throws back across his body. It was like, this is the Joe Burrow we're used to watching, yes. And we have not seen that. Like, just that move. It's just a matter of like, oh, yeah, evade the pass rush a little bit, reset your legs, throw the ball. It takes an extra second, and he hasn't been giving himself an extra second, and now it seems he is.
Yes. One of the things that I love about the Bengals, I mentioned earlier, is just when they say screw it, and their neutral pass rate just skyrockets to the point where they just say, Burrow, you're going to throw it 40-plus times a game. And it's actually good for our offense rather than just farting around. So one of the things that I was hoping for is like, man, are we just going to get pure volume from Joe Burrow? Because at the beginning of the year, you were getting volume, but it was inefficient, short passes with no time. So it was just like the worst possible combination. Put these guys in order. Okay, so I have Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, all ahead of Burrow in Dynasty. Okay, I think we all feel that way. It's the top 3. Is Herbert still ahead of Burrow in terms of Dynasty rankings for you?
Yes. Herbert runs more. So they're both seen as pocket passers, but there's a lot more groundwork that Herbert can do, and so I will trust that as the tiebreaker.
Betz?
I mean, I think it's a coin flip, truthfully. You know that I have a soft spot for Justin Herbert, and we love the Chargers, and we're biased, so I guess I'll say that. But I wouldn't fault anyone that says that they have Burrow ahead of Justin Herbert.
I feel like it's kind of like locked in that Burrow, Herbert are kind of that next little tier of quarterbacks that you can just feel confident in. Would you rather have Lamar or Joe Burrow in Dynasty?
That one's tough.
Yeah, that one is very tough. It's ironic because the tiebreaker goes to the mobile quarterback when I'm talking about the two pretty much pocket passers. But when you're talking about the flip to a truly mobile quarterback, a quarterback that, like when you're up near 40% of your fantasy points come from running, you don't have as long a shelf life. Like we've seen that with a lot of the guys. When we were getting towards the quote-unquote end of Cam Newton's career, I think we were a couple years early on calling that, but it was still young, right? Like you've got Aaron Rodgers playing at 40,000 years old. You had Tom Brady going late into his career. The pocket passers will have more longevity. Cam Newton, how old was he when it, he was still relatively young for the quarterback position when he fell off the face of the map. I'll look up his age and when that decline happened, but I think when I'm in a dynasty, I love both those players. I'm going to go Joe Burrow just for the longevity.
Betz?
Yeah, I've got it actually pulled up, Jason, right now with Cam. He last played in 2021.
Yeah, but
he was kind of signed like mid-season. Yeah, he was signed like mid-season. He put up almost 600 rushing yards in 2020 with New England in 15 games. So, but before that, it was like 700 yards. He had a 600-yard season. And early on in his career, he was pushing over 700 yearly. So
yeah, he never
kind of like the midpoint of his career.
Yeah,
I would say is when it started to decline.
Even at 29 years old, he threw 3,300 passing yards, had a good season. Got injured, was never the same, really, never hit 3,000 passing yards again. So, I mean, you're talking about, I mean, that is super young for a quarterback to be like, oh, yeah, at 29, that was the last good year of his career. And he was dominant up to that point.
Right. And Lamar, I mean, so with Cam, it's like you're getting a goal line back. That's what he was with the Patriots at the very end. He was just basically a goal line back for them. But Lamar is a different kind of runner in the sense of he's the greatest rushing quarterback of all time. Like, he's going to break the record with still years to go. So I think I lean Lamar because I think that there's a higher ceiling every single year. Although Burrow just seems like somebody you could just say, hey, he's got 10 more years. So let's move to running back. I want to talk about a player. You may have heard of him before. He went bananas this past week. We played him in DFS. Breece Hall, 22 years old. His opportunity share went from 39% week 1 to 40 to 54. And then this past week up to 71%. And Robert Saleh.
Yeah, baby.
He told us, right? This is one of those times you're like, thank you. Thank you. I can trust you at least for another week. And went for 177 yards. Man, so I found this stat from Football Perspective. Breece Hall has averaged 6.3 yards per carry in his 12 career games. That's the highest yards per carry average of any player in the first 12 games since 1970. And you can see it on the field when you get chunk gains after chunk gains. And sometimes he gets stopped and you're like, come on, I know there's more there, but you know he's about to break another one. So Jason, just gush.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't love a player more than I've loved Breece Hall. He's been my guy forever.
Is he your Keenan Allen?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. If the way that you think of Keenan Allen is how I think of Breece Hall. He's pretty much like my favorite prospect. Everyone knows how much I loved Bijan Robinson. I think Bijan is unfathomably good. He was like, another guy that, I mean, everybody loved Bijan. That wasn't special. But in my personal pre-NFL draft rankings, not necessarily after when you had second-round capital versus going in the top 10, but pre-NFL draft, I had Breece scored out better than Bijan, who, is, a generational talent. That's what I've always believed in with Breece Hall. It was nice to see. So there was some I guess it was reported, but it was kind of on the down low. It wasn't like a widely known thing, but some reporters were talking about with the Dalvin Cook signing that the reason it took a long time was because they made it clear to Dalvin whose backfield this is, and they wanted to make sure he was okay with it. Now, they paid him like a starter, and so then it was like, oh, wow, is he coming into, he's Dalvin Cook, and he's getting paid a lot of money. Maybe this is going to be a 1-2 punch. But now what we've seen, and you go back in time and connect that with the reports that that he was told, like, this is Breece Hall's backfield and you will just be there to support when that time comes, and you look at what's happened with Dalvin Cook's snaps, 50% snaps week 1, down to 36%, down to 25%, 17% this last week. He is an afterthought, and he looks terrible too. But it's one of those situations where now we go, okay, this is Breece Hall's team. This is his backfield. He's going to get the volume that he needs. He looks healthy. It's full steam ahead. Now, obviously, for this year, you lost Elijah Vera-Tucker and you lost Aaron Rodgers. It's not going to always be the Denver Broncos you're playing. It's not going to be as good as it was this last week, but I am in love with him as a talent, and it is his starting now for the rest of his uninjured career. This is his team, and he will be great for fantasy.
Whatever buy low window existed 2-3 weeks ago is gone. It's gone in Dynasty. There's no chance. You could have sold somebody a narrative that said, this offense is going to tank. You had a couple of weeks where he was getting no opportunities and was bad, and he was angry. There's no opportunity to buy him.
Yeah, I tried to get him with a Puka trade a couple of weeks ago when it was looking real bad for Breece and
throwing out a
Puka. Get it done. Yeah.
Betz, I'm going to phrase this question because before the season, we had Breece ranked comfortably as our RB2 in Dynasty. It was Bijan, Breece. My question is there a giant gap between Breece and whoever's next at running back in Dynasty?
I mean, you think about the landscape, right? And like, I kind of talked about this last week with Andy and Mike. It's like, when you're trying to think about a trade target in Dynasty for running back, is there anyone you actually feel good about starting currently besides CMC, Bijan, Dave Montgomery? Like, besides those guys, Austin Eckler, obviously the health, but like Jonathan Taylor's workload is a question mark. And, we lost Nick Chubb. You lose J.K. Dobbins.
Pollard's been
Achane's
annoying.
injured. Swift, is one of those guys that you can plug in comfortably. But from like a dynasty perspective, there's a flip happening right now, like where these guys are aging out, the Ecklers of the world. We just talked about Dalvin Cook is done. Like now you're getting this youth at the position, and these are the guys. So I agree with it. I think there's a massive drop off. If you really believe in Achane's talent, which I think all of us do, and the system, he certainly is in the conversation to move up a couple of tiers at least in dynasty rankings. But
you got ETN,
for the youth
you got
and the upside
Walker.
that these guys have, it's these guys, I think.
Yeah, it's hard because we talk about things transitioning, but it feels like those two are alone to me, where I feel like not just they're good, they're going to crush, but like value-wise, they're going to hold so much more than some of these other players. Like ETN is probably my 3 or 4 if I were to go there right now.
Are you, Kyle, are you doing this on purpose to me? Do you know my main dynasty roster?
Oh, I know.
It's Bijan, Breece, and Travis Etienne, baby. Let's go. But I think Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey are ahead of Etienne and Kenneth Walker in a dynasty league to me still.
Yeah, I think you can put, 3, 4, and 5. There's some combination of that. I think my main point was just to say, like, Breece just feels so rock solid despite whatever they have at quarterback this year. So just need to bring him up, give Jason a chance to gush. Let's move to wide receiver, and I want to give some context for Jamar Chase, who went bananas, 15 for 192 and 3. He's the third player since 1950 with multiple games of 50-plus points. That's with Marshall Faulk, Jerry Rice. Those are like Mount Rushmore players in the NFL and for fantasy. So that's where Jamar Chase is at. And through 4 weeks, guys, his yards per out run was looking pretty gross. His targets per out run was still looking fine, but there's a lot of things about Chase you're like, is he going to be used the same way? Are we going to get these monster games? Is he going to catch a touchdown? Like, that's wild that we were asking that question. Of course, he explodes. Betz, you brought up some stuff on the DFS podcast about him being Offensive Player of the Year, and he used to be the favorite coming in the year, went down, now he's back up. There's just a lot to like, and they have a bunch of awesome games coming forward. I wanted to quickly ask this conversation because before the season, I won't say I was like ridiculed, but I did feel like a very strong stance of saying, I think I would rather have Jamar Chase in a dynasty league over Justin Jefferson. This isn't a chance to dunk because there's an injury, but does that feel even more secure now, knowing that Kirk Cousins doesn't look like he's going to be the dude? It's a terrible season, and Jamar Chase is just rolling right now.
Kyle, how could you come on the show and dunk on Justin Jefferson?
Yeah, that was
very
rude,
dude.
That was rude.
Oh my gosh,
to really
this
victory
guy, you
lap
guys
an
should see his
injury.
face.
Unbelievable.
Kyle.
Oh my God.
That is so
It's
Kyle.
It's at Kyle_Borg on Twitter if you want to let him know. But this is so funny, right? Because like,
You guys are the worst.
It's a reminder of how quickly you said it. Things can change in the NFL literally in a week, right? It's like, oh, Justin Jefferson's seeing so much volume. The Vikings are throwing so much. Now, like, is he held out through their week 13 bye with the hamstring injury? Maybe. Remember, he's looking for a new contract, so he's not necessarily incentivized to come back earlier than he's 100%. He's clearly the long-term answer there. But Jamar Chase and the Bengals were broken a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Everyone was worried. Now it's like, oh, things are great. So just a reminder, like, things change very quickly in the NFL. But we talked about it, I think it was with that show was with Mike, and we had just said, like, if you're going to look for one way or the other, which there isn't a wrong choice with those two because they're incredible, he's just tied to Joe Burrow. Whereas like Justin Jefferson, no clue what the situation is next year. He is good enough that he'll overcome any quarterback most likely. But as a coin flip or tiebreaker, I think it makes sense.
Jason, what's your take on, because Chase is at the point now with T. Higgins out where he's just getting peppered with not just volume, insane volume, This is kind of the stuff, like, I was trying to compare their situation. Like, are they just going to go full Matthew Stafford Lions? And he just says, you know what? I'm going to throw the ball to Calvin Johnson as many times as possible. That's kind of like what we could be getting right now. So what's your take on just Chase's outlook versus Jefferson? I know we're flipping a coin. We're not saying anything negative, but what's your take on between those two? Because they're the two names.
Yeah, I don't think Justin Jefferson is bad just because he got injured like Kyle does.
Of course not.
Kyle's
you would never say that.
No, I wouldn't say that. Yeah, I mean, Betz laid it out. When you're tied to Joe Burrow, it's great. I would certainly put Chase above Jefferson in a dynasty league because of that. You've also got, now that the contract situation, we once the league started and it was like, oh, Higgins is not going to get, there was rumors, oh, they're going to sign him. They're not going to sign him. And I don't think they have the money now after the contract to Burrow. So you're talking about going into not only another game or two without Higgins, but then next season you're going subtract Higgins, keep a healthy Burrow. Jamar Chase going to be at like prime wide receiver dominant age. I mean, you're not going wrong with either guys, but Jamar Chase is the wide receiver one in Dynasty.
Yeah, and Betz, you're kind of throwing in some thoughts, but like the Vikings are 1-4, right? And they're lucky to be 1-4. They barely beat the Panthers, so it's like they're one of those teams that we didn't think would be, circling the drain, but they're at least in contention for a Caleb Williams, which is super fun, or Drake May. I've watched some college football. I'm enjoying some Drake May film already. I can say that. So let's take a quick break and we'll be back.
Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime. This week, it's an AFC West showdown as the Denver Broncos head to Kansas City to take on the defending champion Chiefs. Not a Prime member? Sign up for a 30-day free trial to stream the game. Live from Kansas City, it's the Broncos and the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
This is Holly Fry from Stuff You Missed in History class. We all agree that reducing carbon emissions is a good thing, and once again, Toyota is leading the way. We hear a lot about fully electric vehicles, and Toyota has them, and more on the way, but we also know a BEV is not for everyone, whether it's because of cost, range, or concerns about finding a charging station when you need it. Plus, the raw materials used to manufacture batteries are limited. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future, in vehicles and in manufacturing plants, too, in the years ahead. The materials used to make just one long-range battery for an EV could be used to make batteries for 6 plug-in hybrids or 90 gas-electric hybrids. That's why Toyota's position today is electrified, diversified, empowering you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint with the vehicle that's right for you. A hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or battery EV. So shop, learn more, and get details at toyota.com/beyondzero. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, we're going to finish talking about a couple of tight ends who blew up in week 5, give some context for the players. And I just want to say this, with tight ends, it's gross half the time. But the underlying metrics we care about is this person running routes? Like, are they participating on the field? Usually we look for a route rate that's above 85%. If they're pass blocking a ton, that's kind of a red flag. But we really care about, do they have big plays? Do they get targets down the field? So Dallas Goedert was one of those players this past week who went off 8 for 117 and 1. Your Eagles bets. But I think I want to give credit to Jason here. You stuck up for him. I listened on the road. You stuck up for that man like 2 or 3 times on the show this past week because everything was there. He was getting the slot snaps, second most in the league, second most routes among tight ends. It just wasn't happening yet. And then all of a sudden he blows up this past week against the Rams. And it was very early on, like, oh, this is a blow up game. So
very early. It was absurd. He was the whole drive. I mean, they marched down the field, whatever it was, 75 yards and a touchdown on the opening drive for the Eagles. And I think maybe like 18 or so of those yards weren't Dallas Goedert. Every pass was like, I started laughing in Mike's face because we entered this game about equal in DraftKings lineup, and then I just started going nuclear, part and parcel to because Dallas Goedert was great. I mean, when you've got high-end tight ends in their prime that have proven on the NFL field they can be great, you don't go away from them because you don't have better options. You don't just get frustrated by 3 or 4 or 5 bad starts in a row. You have to keep them in your lineup because no one else does that. No one else can go out and go 8 for 117-1 at the tight end position. What you're doing when you pivot to, I'm going to go play Tyler Higbee because, he got more targets last week or whatever. He can't put up a game like that. And, so there's been enough film with Dallas Goedert. He is 28 years old. He's on a great offense. You just stick with those. You stick with those type of options. And the best part is he still gets targets and runs routes.
Yes.
He is not one of those guys like the next guy we're about to talk about who is as elite as it gets at blocking. That kind of sucks when you're like a monster in the blocking game where you could just you could change the game by being a lineman. I don't want that. I don't want you to be an offensive lineman.
For sure. Betz, you're our local boots on the ground, for the Eagles, non-biased. But, I mean, it was kind of inevitable that Goedert would have a game to break out because before, the yards per reception were low, the ADOT was low, he had 88 yards on the season, but I'm assuming that was just talked up all week and then he explodes.
What's kind of funny about this Eagles team this year is that whenever there has been a squeaky wheel, the problem is solved, right? Like, remember the A.J. Brown incident on the sideline against, I think it was the Vikings when Devonta Smith was going off. A.J. Brown's peppered with targets a couple weeks in a row. Talk all week has been, where's Dallas Goedert? Why isn't he getting the ball? Pops off. Devonta Smith, seen walking the sidelines, not thrilled last week.
Oh, good.
Just saying.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. Stomp around, Devonta. I need you.
But in all seriousness, I think we're going to have a ton of games where, it's going to ping pong. It's kind of like George Kittle, right? Like sometimes it's Debo, sometimes it's Ayuk, but then there he is, Kittle. This same thing with Dallas Goedert. But the Eagles have some games, they are going to be pushed a lot in the fourth quarter. They've got the Dolphins coming up. They've got the Cowboys twice, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Niners. They're going to have to throw. And so I think in general, I'm very bullish on all three guys, especially their big three with Goedert, Smith, and A.J. Brown, obviously. Speaking
of Kittle, he had the 3 touchdowns this past week. It was a nice birthday present. I don't know if you saw the clip, but afterwards, his whole family was there, one by one, giving him hugs for his birthday. It was pretty sweet for him to get that. But the scary part about Kittle, and I am a dynasty manager of George Kittle, is that there's no way I will ever bench him, and yet I feel like 50 to 60% of the time I'm mostly angry.
I 100% trading George Kittle. If I had George Kittle on a redraft league in a dynasty league, he has a monster performance like that. I've just been waiting for a monster performance to tell people trade George Kittle. He is super talented. He is. If he were to go to the Chiefs, he would be drafted at the 105. He is phenomenal. But this offense is a different beast. They use him in the running game. Most games aren't going to be his. And when they aren't his games, he has a lower floor than most of these guys. Like Dallas Goedert, when he was sucking, he's still getting 4 or 5 receptions, just not down the field. And, it wasn't usually as bad as George Kittle's bad games are, crushing for your fantasy lineup. But you're right. You can't bench him. You have to wait and get this type of a performance. But what you can do is once you get that type of performance, capitalize, try to get a haul for him because teams are thirsty for tight ends. Go look at your league and be
sure.
Who is crying at tight end? And they will be very excited to get a brand new shiny 3-touchdown George Kittle.
Yeah.
They'll pay up.
Contenders can easily look at their roster and say, hey, I've been rolling with, I don't know, Tyler Higbee or somebody else, Hunter Henry. And they're just like, hey, it's fine, but I want somebody that can really be a difference maker. And let's be honest, George Kittle looks cool on a roster because he can go for 25, 30 points. But so what could I actually get? Let's, help me out here. This is a rebuild team. This team's acquired some picks. It's got some great young players. I'm just killing it in the young players department. And I have the picks. So I won't accept anything less than a first-round pick, though. And yet people kind of don't want to give that right now for George Kittle.
Yeah, I mean, you can do a couple different things. One, if George Kittle is your primary tight end, you might need to be receiving a tight end on the way back. You might want to try to, dare I say it, look for Kyle Pitts plus, where you've got youth and future, but you also get picks and something else. Or you try to package George Kittle plus a pick of your own, or a middling player or two, and try to get Mark Andrews, who's been, maybe a little disappointing to some managers. That, to me, if you look in it from a dynasty perspective, there's not a lot of tight ends I love. I mean, there's like Mark Andrews, T.J. Hawkinson, Sam Laporta,
Goddard.
That's, end of list. So if you can try to trade, if you could trade George Kittle right now straight up for Sam Laporta, because someone's like, oh man, I'm just capitalizing on these 4 rookie games or 5, I would do, oh my goodness, I would do that in a heartbeat.
I feel like
would you do
somebody wouldn't do that.
Like Kittle in a second?
No, they very well might not. What Betz?
Could you do like Kittle in a second for Laporta? Is that a deal you'd make?
Yeah, I would be fine with that.
To get Laporta?
I think I'd be okay with that. It's so tough because, like, right now I'm looking at rankings before the season. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to do a kind of redo where we go, hey, here's where we're at, how dynasty rankings have changed a little bit from the top positions. But I'm looking at the tight end position. I'm like, man, there are a bunch of guys here that I don't know if I want to trade. And they're young enough, like Pat Freiermuth. Don't really want to trade for him. It's like Evan Ingram, same thing as Kittle. Same area, same age, no thank you. Dalton Kincaid, okay. It's young enough, maybe disappointed, but this person spent a first-round pick on them. So it's like, wherever I'm going, I'm probably going to have to take tight end out of the equation and figure that out later and just say, this person needs tight end, I'm going to shoot for it and try to get them to upgrade the position. But it's hard. Like, trading for a tight end that's over 30 is not a great thing, especially if people know that Kittle is the most volatile tight end. Like, would you say he's the most?
I would say he's Taysom Hill's the most, and then George Kittle's the second most,
and then Jonnu Smith.
When you think about his Jonnu, his highs and his lows, I mean, they couldn't be more different, right? Kittle can come out for 3 touchdowns, and then the next week literally have 1 catch. So yeah, he's wild, man. But more wild is that Jonnu is the tight end 1 in Atlanta.
That's the worst. I hate it. All right, one more segment.
Take it or leave it.
In the same vein that we've been talking about bounce back players for week 5, let's call our shot here, people. Who's a player in week 6 that you think can bounce back? Just a parting thought. So Jason, I'll let you go first.
My parting thought on a bounce back player that is going to be important for Dynasty is Ramondre Stevenson. He has sucked. His schedule has not been good. He just came off of the New York Jets' awesome defense, the Dallas Cowboys' awesome defense, and the New Orleans Saints' awesome defense. They got shellacked. Did the Patriots the last 2 games. I think they're combined like 70-3 or something like that. Going forward against the Las Vegas Raiders, who usually don't have a good defense except for this week, the Buffalo Bills, who lost half their defense this week. You've got the Colts coming up. I think brighter days are ahead for Ramondre Stevenson, and at the running back position, it's just so important in Dynasty. And I think fantasy managers who have, I know this for a fact, fantasy managers who have Ramondre Stevenson right now are worried that they have absolutely nothing, like that they don't have a startable asset. And so I don't believe that to be true. I think he will be a startable, important fantasy asset going forward.
All right, Betz, you're up next.
We built this city.
It's a good one.
I was hoping you'd have the drop ready. I am wearing the Pity City t-shirt currently in support of Michael Pittman. Weeks 1 through 3, 11 targets. But over the last couple of weeks, it's been the wide receiver 72 and the wide receiver 37 on the back of just 6 total receptions in 2 games. But Gardner Minshew's going to be under center for 4+ weeks. And I think we're going to see more pass attempts from the offense. So I'm in this game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are 23rd in schedule adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. Let's go, Pity City.
I'm going to throw out Trevor Lawrence right now. His TD rate is 2.8%. That's gross. His wide receivers have the third most drops in the league, but there are some encouraging things. Per PFF, he has 11 big-time throws, which the way that they grade them out is these are really important throws down the field, big deal in close windows. That's tied with Jalen Hurts for the second most in the NFL, and TD rate is one of those things that doesn't really stabilize until you get about 250-plus attempts. So I'm not really worried about 2.8%. They beat the Bills this past week. He was the QB8 against these Colts in week 1. So I think that Trevor Lawrence, it's not been great. It's kind of been meh, middle of the road, but I think he's in a good spot to be able to bounce back this week. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty podcast. If you want to get all of our rankings, go to thefantasyfootballers.com and get those, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty podcast. If you want to take your dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.
Introducing the first ever Grand Highlander, a mid-size SUV with the ideal combination of space, performance, style, and advanced tech. The roomy Grand Highlander boasts 3 spacious rows with available seating for up to 8. Its available 362 horsepower hybrid max powertrain unlimited and platinum trims delivers the power, acceleration, and efficiency so your family can take on any adventure. There's even a standard digital key, a panoramic view mirror, and a 12.3-inch multimedia touchscreen so you always arrive on time. Live life grander in the first ever Toyota Grand Highlander. Learn more at toyota.com/Grand Highlander.